thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me in the studio today are two of your faves. We've got Jen and Chuck in the house today. So let's have them introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump in with today's discussion. Chuck, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm Chuck Voigt, retired 8 years ago from the Department of Crop Sciences at the University of Illinois. My specialties there were vegetables and herbs, but my undergraduate education covered pretty much the gamut, so we can field questions if we get to that point.
Okay, all right, Jen.
I'm Jen Nelson, and you can find me at the University of Illinois in the Department of Crop Sciences. I teach Hort 105 vegetable gardening, and I also had pretty broad education, worked in extension for a long time, and also you can find me online at groundedandgrowing.com where I write about gardening.
Now, you guys have known each other for years, right?
Yeah, when she was first a grad student.
Yep. Ancient history.
It comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Awesome. Okay, so both of you brought things to talk about, and then we've got some other cool stuff to talk about. So, Jen, we'll start with you. You want to talk about deer damage.
Yeah, I was walking around trying to look for some show and tell items, and I noticed these are both off of hydrangeas in our yard. One is from Hydrangea paniculata and one is from oakleaf hydrangea, but I recognize that the deer have been visiting our yard, and how you can tell deer versus rabbit. Deer damages usually looks kind of raggedy and not a clean cut, and that's because deer only have bottom incisors. They don't have any front teeth on the top. They just have kind of a rough patch. So when they bite, they can't bite clean through, so they just kind of rip it.
Okay.
And for both, and if you were to look for versus rabbit damage, I did an example with my pruners. Rabbit damage is almost always at a 45-degree angle, clean cut.
It looks like you used pruners.
Looks like you used pruners, so that's what I did this morning because I didn't see any rabbit damage offhand. We haven't had any decent snow cover that stuck around this year, but what can throw people for a loop is if you have decent snow cover for a while, the rabbits will climb on top of that snow and get to the top parts of different shrubs in your yard, and then when the snow recedes, you're like, what the heck, are giant rabbits in my yard or what? But that's something to keep in mind. But the deer, like on the paniculata, that's not going to affect much of how it blooms because it blooms on new and old wood. On the oakleaf hydrangea, it's going to they've potentially eaten some of my future flowers, and I'm not happy about that, but they didn't eat it to the ground, so I can live and let live. And maybe next year I'll be better about spraying some of the deterrents. I'm just ran out of time this year.
Have you had luck with the spray deterrent?
Yeah, we have had luck with them. We've done different things over the years. Irish Spring soap seems to work really well.
I've heard that.
We've used some that have lovely things like putrefied eggs and putrefied blood and such. Kind of stinks when you're putting it on, but once it dries, you don't smell it, but they can.
Interesting. Do you know why they choose these to munch? Is there a particular?
They must taste good. All they did on both of them, all they did was take the outer buds, so those must be particularly tasty.
Gotcha.
If the plants were smaller, I would worry more because there's more potential that they could chew them all the way to the ground. But they're getting big enough that I don't think that's going to be an issue unless our deer numbers grow dramatically up.
Gotcha. Okay. Did you want to add anything to that? You were nodding like
No,
you know the pain of
You
deer
probably
damage.
do.
We have some deer damage. Fortunately, knock wood, wherever there's some wood, it's not terrible.
Okay.
But
We didn't start out having much deer damage at all, but we've had a lot of development by us, and so they've been pushed off of where they normally found easy pickings. And
your yard is pretty lush and delicious.
Yeah, and
looking.
they've come clear up to the house. Like I planted the paniculata, the hydrangea paniculata, thinking that the deer would likely get it. I planted the oak leaf thinking, oh, they won't come up this close to the house. And yep,
Seeing
they
little
are
tracks
now.
in the snow, and they've come right up to the door.
once they find that salad bar, they're just...
Oh yeah.
They've come as close as my kitchen window.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like they found the bird feeder, and yeah, they're just like, get the word out.
Tell all your
Come over to
friends
the
this is the
Nelsons.
place to
It's
go.
great.
Awesome. Okay. All right, Chuck, we are to you. What do you
Okay.
got?
Well, I I brought in my Seed Savers Exchange Winter Yearbook, which is just
This is not a catalog, right? Explain the difference between the yearbook and the catalog.
the yearbook is where all the people who are listing things, people who are saving different things, list them, and then for the price of postage or whatever, which when they started that wasn't much, and now that's quite a bit. But you can go through there, and there's thousands and thousands of things. I think several years ago they got to the point where they couldn't put any more in it because this is as big as you can make
Oh, wow.
a perfect bound thing. Today, if you're digital, it's online. If you're an old analog Luddite like me, who
You want to hold it.
You're right. I was a lifetime subscriber back when they needed the money, and so I just hung on to that and really squeezing all the good out of that little bit that I gave them at that time. Now it's like $1,000 or something, but it wasn't at that point. So anyway, I get that.
Can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
So if you're like let's say the broom corn that you grow, do you list that in
I
here?
haven't in a while. Both the red and the black have been in here, and I would assume probably still are.
Wow.
Somehow, one got listed as they aren't listed the same, which is kind of perplexing, but they're both still in there.
Second question, is everything in there, does it have to be native or native plants? Are they all native plants, or does it matter?
Native, there's a combination of heirloom varieties
Gotcha.
of mostly edible things.
Gotcha. Okay.
And also some old commercial open pollinated varieties that are no longer listed anywhere.
Gotcha.
So the only way they get saved is if somebody does it. So that's been when I first was introduced to them back in 1982, ancient history.
I was born.
I went kind of crazy, and I ended up with 150 potato varieties because I was really into potatoes, and managed to maintain those for quite a while. And then originally, they thought that if they commerced in these, that somehow that would diminish them. But what they did was they awakened all this demand, and so every other seed company in the country was benefiting from their emphasis on
Gotcha.
heirloom varieties. And so finally they got with the program, and now they put out a really fine catalog of some of their choicest materials. And so they've actually done a better job of financing themselves because they have, but they do keep them separate. This is people exchanging things with other people of like mind, and this is just somebody who can go in and buy them. But that also keeps things alive because
Yes.
if there's a demand for them, that's good. And I just brought this one in because it's kind of fun. My friend Carol Lee Snyder in Indiana took me to this Amish seed company. It's south of Fort Wayne. And it's like everything. They have all kinds of things, but they
Can you
have.
hold that up?
Sure. And I'm not necessarily recommending them, but it's just quirky enough that it really has caught my fancy. If you go there, they have all the seed packets lined up, and you can go in and just pick out what you want. And they will do mail order, but they don't do online.
Ah.
So it's
tracks.
one of those, what's allowed and what isn't.
Yes.
I think just for practicality, they will use a calculator to add things up when you're there.
Very nice.
But it's really quite interesting. And then they have all the greenhouse supplies and all that stuff as well. But being a vegetable guy, it was just kind of fun to just be able to go in there and pluck.
Tell us some things that you bought.
Well, I bought Harvest Moon watermelon,
Yes.
which is really the only seedless watermelon that I've ever truly liked. It's like it has the yellow spots on a dark green background like the Moon and Stars, which is
That's
an
the
heirloom
one.
that Seed Savers actually rediscovered. They originally had thought that maybe it no longer existed, but certainly it exists and is now in multiple forms. What else did I buy? Oh, I bought the Sugar Cube muskmelon there.
Yes. Hope
That-
those do well this year. I always benefit when Chuck has a great harvest.
Yeah, and and then I bought just some spinach
Yes.
and some other things just because they were there, and I can buy them here at the farm store, but it was kind of fun to do that while I was over there. And
It is.
it was a fun drive through the country because my friend Carol Lee lives in Hartford City, which is kind of between Muncie and Fort Wayne. So
Seed time is always a fun time of year.
it is.
It just reminds you that warmer days are.
Yes,
on their
given
way.
my growing physical limitations, there's kind of a little bit of this with seed catalogs for me because my mind would get me committed to a whole lot of things that I just can't keep up with anymore.
Like how many varieties of potato was that you had?
150-ish.
Yeah, no big deal, I guess.
except the thing about potatoes is they're vegetatively propagated and they don't last more than 1 year. So you grow them this year, you have to grow them next year, and
Gotcha.
ad infinitum. They have done some tissue culture work to clean up some of the viruses and things that build up in them over time, which has been good because then you start with nice clean material like certified seed versus something that somebody's been maintaining for 102 years. They pick up things because all the little leaf hoppers hop around and
Yeah.
spread things. So
much to learn.
seed catalogs are still wonderful. That's the first ones I got, I remember memorizing everything in them, and it's kind of where I became a horticultural prodigy was reading seed catalogs. So
Love that. Love that. Speaking of seeds, Jen, you were super pumped this morning when you came in.
Ooh.
First thing
Yes.
she says when she comes in the door is, "Did you hear about the new tomatoes?" And I hadn't. So tell us all about these new tomatoes, and you actually got some seeds.
I didn't get the seeds
Not
yet.
yet,
I
not
ordered
yet.
them. I had seen this article pop up on NPR. I think that's the one you've got pulled up. And it's actually a purple tomato. And what makes it unique, I've grown some supposedly purple tomatoes in the past, and tomatoes usually can only make that pigment in the skin, so the flesh would be more or less red. This one's purple all the way through, and it's novel for that reason, but it's also novel because where they got that purple pigment is snapdragons. So it's the first genetically modified vegetable to be sold to home gardeners, and people didn't think there was a market to market those seeds to home gardeners. They didn't think home gardeners would be on the receptive to it. They have shown that it has added nutritional benefit for the anthocyanins or antioxidants, so lots of benefits to things like our heart and blood pressure.
Now, when people hear genetically modified, I feel like we've sort of been taught to
Freak out.
freak out. Yes. So when you say that, you guys understand that it's not, something from a sci-fi film, but help us understand why, in this instance, it's not a bad thing.
From what I understand, from what I've read, is that they were able to show that, number one, tomatoes already make this pigment. They just don't make it in a high quantity. So by moving the genes from snapdragon in, they were able to have the whole fruit express the gene, not just the skin. So it's not anything that we wouldn't already get from some tomatoes
Gotcha.
or other produce, and they showed that there's clear health benefit to it. They had to clear all sorts of hurdles with the USDA and whatnot. From what I understand, this was developed in the UK. So they had a lot of hurdles to go through to.
And then I asked
Sell
you,
it.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
it's okay.
So if you save seeds from these, because I know sometimes if you save seed from a sunflower that you grew, you're not going to get the same color. Will this grow true?
It's supposed to. The article I read this morning said that was also a unique point in their marketing. This is they want gardeners to save the seed. There are some catches, like they don't want you selling what you're saving,
Gotcha.
and they don't want you using it to start your own tomato breeding program. But they want that spirit of gardening and community of sharing seeds with each other. I don't know that it would end up in the exchange yearbook here, but the idea that part of gardening is relating to our fellow man and sharing the wealth of our garden.
So you jumped on and got some.
I did.
So fingers
They're
crossed,
they're
so-
not cheap. It's $20 for 10 seeds. But if it's like they say that I can save seeds from it, I can recoup that in seeds.
That's
this
what we
year.
tell
That's what I'm
ourselves, right?
telling myself.
It's the initial investment, you know.
Right. Hopefully they taste good. The last blue tomato or purple tomato I grew was kind of disappointing. I think Chuck, you've probably grown it.
Yeah.
It was developed just by natural breeding and selection, and
Yeah.
it was kind of not blah from a taste standpoint.
Yeah, it was not spectacularly tasty.
Well, we'll
And
see.
it was interesting because only the sunny side.
Right. Only
got
it
the
only
pigment.
developed it in the
Oh,
sun.
it
Where
was
this is
contingent
supposed to
on
be the
that.
whole thing. And if I were to just see that without it being cut open, I wouldn't. Looks like a grape or
It
something.
does.
It doesn't even look like
Yeah.
a tomato.
It doesn't have a pit, but they look like plums. to me.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, hopefully those do well for you, and you'll be able to bring some in
Yes, I will.
later in the
Absolutely.
summer and cut one, and
Always thinking about the show.
always. That's why
Yeah.
we do this, right?
The reveal.
The big
Right.
reveal.
It's,
Yes.
it's like my watermelon radishes.
Yes, we love those.
Those
you
are
know,
fun.
One of those moments.
I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so in true almost spring, late winter fashion, you may remember last year Chuck was so kind to type us up a foolproof planting guide.
Blame Chuck.
Blame Chuck.
If it doesn't work, blame Chuck.
So we asked Taylor to dig this out of the archives, and Chuck is going to walk us through some of the things that we can get started and what to look forward to. So take it
Right.
away, Chuck.
Well, the very earliest things that we're starting, we're kind of getting to the end of that window. You know, things that can go out in chilly weather in April or so here in mid-America. But I think you could probably still get by with things like celery, celeriac, parsley, onions, shallots from seed, leeks, and chives if you're going to start a new patch of those. But with chives, it's almost better to get a plant that you like and then divide it and do it that way because they're more uniform that way. But things that have small seeds, things that the seeds germinate really slowly, like the celery and the celeriac, you really need to get those going in January into mid-February to have any chance of getting them out in mid to late April. But it is fun, you know, if you're in love with your seed catalogs, you might get the urge to grow an Elsa Craig onion or a Kelsey Giant onion, and the best way to do that is to buy a packet of seed and start your own. So,
Okay.
and then you start to go beyond that. Some of the herbs, rosemary and lavender, germination there is a little bit slow, and the little seedlings are not all that robust. So you want to get those going. And then things that come on quickly, you know, into March, the whole brassica bunch, you know, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi, collards, kale, all of those things you want to get going in probably early March. And then they're ready to go out, because in some parts of mid-America, you might in a given year, and this might be one depending, where it warms up and you can actually get things out in the garden in late March, which it's good that these come very quickly. And if you started them a lot sooner, they would get overgrown, and they just do better if they get to that cute, you know, several leaf stage, and then get them in the ground where they can take off and, you know, dodge rabbits.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask, because you mentioned about it perhaps getting warmer this year. Does that have anything to do with us kind of changing zones at all? Should we expect anything from that? Should we do anything different with regard to that?
Well, the thing about zones is it's based on average winter low temperatures. And average doesn't mean it's not going to plunge. I don't think that means that we're still not going to get a 20 below zero night, which is a zone 5 thing, where if theoretically we're in 6A now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that that we don't need to do those zone 6 plants somewhere that's in a kind of a microclimate.
Gotcha.
Right.
Maybe closer to the house or
yeah,
something like
I
that.
don't think I'm ready to change my frost-free dates or anything like
Okay.
No.
that.
Okay, good advice, because I know some people were wondering, oh, that means we can get outside sooner.
As we've seen, average means absolutely nothing anymore.
Yes.
So
stick to what you know, and maybe
if you want to experiment with something that's been just slightly out of your reach for years, that's fine, but be prepared to have it not be a total success.
we're not going to take our $20 tomato seeds
Right. No.
and throw them out on a gamble.
No. No.
Late March.
Exactly. Like
Something safe.
and just because the temperature's okay doesn't mean that the ground is in any shape. We could have a ton of rain too, and it can be just too wet. And there's a lot of factors besides temperature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And then we're getting down into April, which we'll save those for another show. We don't want everyone to get too ahead of things.
Right. Well,
themselves.
yes, that's good. And the point is just take into account how fast things develop. Like a basil plant develops so quickly that you don't want to start that too far ahead because
Right.
basil is just so temperature sensitive.
So read your
outside.
packets. Okay, we did have one question come in on Facebook. This is from Karen Hoyt Shirts. And she says, is there a smaller, maybe 4 to 5 feet evergreen that grows in almost full shade that would provide some contrast to the white pine that make up a lot of my yard? I'd love something chartreuse or blue, but anything with color would be great. And she understands that would require more sun. So any thoughts there?
Well, the first thought I have is, generally speaking, the people who like bluish foliage, don't like chartreuse foliage. But so she's unique in that regard, in that she likes them both. Boy, almost total shade kind of really puts a kibosh
damper
on
on
things.
everything. I wondered about maybe azalea or rhododendron. There's some that are evergreen, and you would at least get some color in the spring.
Yeah, just briefly.
Right, and with the pines, you would have that acidic soil that they like.
Right.
But I don't know if it's enough light for all of them.
Yeah.
When that hit there's the 4 to 5 feet ask, and then there's the color ask. So it's kind of a tall order for a shady spot.
Yeah, you might be doing some trade-offs here, like maybe trade the color for something that can tolerate the shade. But evergreens, I'm drawing a blank on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. We've got about 4 minutes left. And while we're talking about starting seed, I wanted to ask if you guys have any advice or best practice for folks who are going to be getting their seed trays out and getting those started. So we know the wash them out, but what else sets you up for success to not,
Well, if they're reusing them, they really need to soak them in a dilute bleach solution
okay.
for
Not just a quick
30
rinse.
minutes or so.
Yeah, usually
Okay.
a 10% bleach.
10% bleach, give them a good soak. All right. And then as far as our planting material, I like core. Do you guys recommend anything else or amendments to that?
I've used that, or I've used just the seed starting mix, and I've seen instead of peat pots, the pots made from core. That's becoming more popular.
Chuck, what do you do?
Generally, I just use one of the brand name potting mix to start things, and that seems to work
Yeah.
fairly well. I like it because it's got a little fertilizer in it, where the seed starting mix will get them up, but not
Some of the
really
seed
get them
starting
going.
mix does have fertilizer
Well, then I've
incorporated
been-
now. Yeah, but I
I-
think it's the same brand you're referring to.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm getting more for my money with
Yeah, no, I
with
get
with
you
the other
there.
thing, but yeah, and in some of the finer seeds where it's really
Sure.
important to have contact, I would go to a seed starting mix where it's very fine and nice. I haven't gotten to the stage where I've demonized peat as much as a lot of people seem to have. So I kind of use what's on the shelf.
Okay.
But I can see where if you're concerned about non-renewability and those kinds of things. At Garden Writers, the peat people are there, and they're making the case that they're at least trying to be renewable to some extent. So maybe it's not as bad as we think, but I don't know that for sure.
Do you fertilize when you plant your seeds, unless there's some in the mix? But when do you want to fertilize or feed those seedlings?
When they come up is when I start worrying.
Yeah, when they
about
start to
it.
get true leaves and
Okay.
are able to utilize it. Before that, it would be too easy to burn the roots
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and cause problems.
What I do when I plant is I make sure that my lights are on, and if I'm going to start seed, I make sure I have lights. No matter how good your window is, you need
I
a
really,
light.
really envy those over-counter LEDs of yours.
Yes, I would have no food in my kitchen,
Oh, yes.
just seeds.
Clear
You
everything
start it,
out
clear
and
it all
just
out.
put the seed trays in.
But I get the lights on them as soon as I plant because you don't technically need them on until the seeds start to germinate, but that always happens when you're not looking, and it doesn't take long for them to have not enough light and get really leggy.
Oh yeah, they etiolate just in a heartbeat.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So get some good potting mix and get some lights. All right. Well, thank you guys. We're out of time. I appreciate you guys coming in. And thank you so much for watching. If you've got questions, you can send them in to us at yourgarden@gmail.com, or you can send them on Facebook. Just search for Mid-American Gardener, and we will see you next time. Good night.